What an honor it is to have on the podcast today Jake Thompson, founder of Heroes Academy and Acton Academy in Boise, Idaho, that he founded in 2016 as the first Acton Academy in the Northwest. Jake is also now the head of the entire Acton Academy network, which includes over 300 learner-driven schools serving thousands of students worldwide. Jake Thompson, welcome to the Liberated Podcast.
You're so kind to host me. Thank you for allowing me to be here. I'm excited.
Oh, I'm so thrilled to have you here. I want to talk all about your founder journey to creating Heroes Academy back in 2016 and your recent leadership role now in kind of overseeing the entire Acton Academy network as Jeff and Laura Sandiford, the co-founders of Acton Academy, sort of stepped down from the day-to-day operations of that and kind of handed the reins to you. So lots to talk about. But would love to start, if we could, Jake, with a little bit of your kind of entrepreneurial background, because before you became an education entrepreneur, you launched your own financial services company. You attended the Acton School of Business, which was a business school founded by Jeff Sandifer. Would love to hear a little bit of that origin story.
Happy to share. It's so interesting for me to reflect on my journey because I, where I am today is just nowhere near where you set out in life sort of to aim. And a lot of times you end up somewhere totally different. And that's a lot of my story. But we were just an ordinary family. We were at the time, let's see, we've got two kids and I'm doing better than I should financially. You mentioned a little bit what I was doing, and I kind of stumbled into writing a book that ended up doing really well in the financial services world. And in fact, not that it's important, but I mean that book totally by accident, just sort of serendipitously, wrote it to help the people I was serving, just to be able to better understand some of the strategies that we were using. And anyway, that book just did better than I thought it would. But interestingly enough, which will tie into Acton in all sorts of ways, I was doing rather well financially, but really unfulfilled. And so I end up feeling prompted to apply to, and I ultimately got accepted to this really competitive, rigorous school called the Acton School of Business. And it's an MBA in entrepreneurship. And so I get in by probably the skin of my teeth, maybe some clerical error, I'm not sure, but I get in and we go down to Austin, Texas. And I have what ends up being like the most transformational experience of my life. Because at Acton, for the first time, I get to experience what real learning looks like. I'm up to this point, I'm used to what everyone else is used to, right? It's like tests and lectures and grades and worksheets. And at Acton, it's like, how do we not waste a single minute on something that doesn't matter and only spend time on things that will matter for the rest of our lives? If that's one way to think about Acton. Excuse me. So I'm at Acton, I'm having this amazing experience. Everything I'm doing feels like it's going to matter at some point in my life, in some meaningful way. Excuse me. Or will just, it's impacting me in the moment. I feel like it's going to matter. And we're doing real experiences, taking on real challenges. And then Acton invites me to do something that I've never really considered, which is to find a calling. And so what a calling is it's this place where your God-given gifts align with some deep passion that you have. And I think the word passion is interesting. I don't know how much you hear the term passion floating around, but to me, it strikes me as maybe misdirected. We sometimes say passion as like, we should pursue our passions to find something that we want to do in our lives. I think most people think of that and think of something fun and exciting, which mostly goes away. The root word of passion is pathos. And that means to struggle, or excuse me, it means to sacrifice for something. The question is something like, what would you suffer for? Because it's so important to you. And so where do your gifts align with your passions in a way that would serve others, in a way that the world deeply needs, right? That's a calling. And so for the first time in my life, I'm invited to consider how I'm going to get to the end of my life and feel like it was a life well lived. So I'm at Acton, I'm having this amazing experience, and I become curious about this little school that one of my teachers, Jeff Sandifer, and his wife, Laura, have started called Acton Academy. And of course, I'm having this amazing experience, and I realize that young people as young as 6 years old are are wrestling with the same ideas and things that we as late 20 early 30s we're wrestling with at the Acton School of Business. And my wife and I just become really amazed by what's happening at Acton, right? We get to see young people who love going to school, who are experiencing real world experiences that actually matter. Again, they're not wasting their time with tests and grades and homework, but rather they're learning to create businesses and sell real products to real customers at a children's business fair and shake someone's hand that they don't know. They're learning to, become a stop motion film creator and create a film to be displayed at the local theater, right? They're learning good habits of setting and reaching goals. They're facing what we at Acton call the three monsters: distraction, resistance, and victimhood, right? And so we're enthralled by what Acton is doing. And Jeff notices that I'm curious, and I'm actually really embarrassed to even tell this part of the story, to be honest with you. Jeff notices that I'm curious, and he eventually invites me to become a guide at Acton Academy, right? Honor of a lifetime, right? In a sense, right? This is like, Jeff is still today he is the most successful entrepreneur that I personally know, right? This is like an opportunity for me to learn at the feet of someone who's not only like someone I look to as a mentor, but also someone who is doing something that you can tell Jeff feels like they are doing something that could potentially change the world. And regrettably, I tell Jeff no. In fact, I tell him something that, like I say, I'm embarrassed to even say out loud. I said, Jeff, I love my kids, but I'm not so sure I love other people's kids all that much. And so we turned down the opportunity. We head back to Boise, Idaho, which is home. And at the time, my daughter is, she's now, she's gearing up to start school. And we do what every, family in the world at this stage has to do. And we begin kind of pursuing what we're going to do for school. Here's the thing about Acton, though. Once you see what it looks like for young people to really take responsibility for their learning, to be able to go through the struggles that help them to become more resilient and capable and strong, when you see what it looks like for them to not waste time in school, but to do real things that matter, that will matter for the rest of their lives, that's impossible to unsee. And so we begin what ends up being a really vain quest to try to find something that we think is going to, fill the gap of Acton. And we ended up, obviously we couldn't shake the reality that if we were going to give our children what we really wanted them to have, that we were going to have to start our own Acton Academy in Boise, Idaho, which we did. And so with, 5 courageous families, 8 young people, we set out on a new adventure to build our Acton, which has grown slowly from 7 to 13 to 20 to 40, 50, 60, 80 plus learners at K through 12 here in Boise, Idaho. So now we have sort of this fun, robust campus where we get to walk alongside young people every day. We actually had our first graduate last year as kind of a culminating experience in our studios. And so I'll maybe round this out by sharing 2 things that I think I've learned that I think will stick with me for the rest of my life. Both of which I didn't know before I started my journey as an Acton owner. The first is, we believe at Acton that every child is a genius who deserves to find a calling that will change the world. We don't mean, of course, genius like some incredibly high IQ, but by definition, a genius is someone who has a unique gift or talent. And I have watched as, 100 plus learners have walked through our studios, and I have seen firsthand how unique and gifted each and every one of these young people is. Like I now, like I hate to admit that before I started acting, I don't think I believed that as much, or maybe I wasn't sure about it, but like I definitely didn't believe it as much as I do now. And like, I know that's true. And so walking alongside them, seeing that has been like a really powerful lesson learned for me. The second though goes back to that young, inexperienced, uh, budding entrepreneur that told Jeff that I didn't love other people's kids all that much. And it has been interesting for me to recognize that some of my greatest joys have been in working with and serving with these young people, or, being able to serve them and to walk alongside them as they take on the challenges and as they make, choices and lead themselves, each other, their communities. It's been really just the joy of like a lifetime. And so that's really my story. Obviously, it rounds out a little bit because now, about a year and a half ago, Jeff and Laura asked me if I'd be willing to take over the Acton Network, which reluctantly, I mean, my story is somewhat of like I happened to find myself at the next, important challenge, probably not as prepared as I should be. And that's how I felt about taking over the network, right? It was just an important call. I felt like the invitation to lead the network was a calling for me, right? That's where I can use my gifts in service to others in a way that really brings me joy and something I deeply care about. So now I'm leading a growing network of 300, Acton Academy campuses all across the world, some of the best people in the world. And it's just an honor. And that's where I'm at now.
Yeah, it's such a great story, Jake, and it's always an honor for me to have Action Academy founders sharing their stories on this podcast. I'd also encourage listeners and viewers to check out Laura Sandifer's fantastic book, Courage to Grow, which she talks about the kind of origin story of creating Action Academy in Austin, Texas, and the evolution of that one campus to now, as you said, roughly 300 worldwide. So just really exciting to see that. I'd love to hear, before we get into your experience now running the network, Jake, a little bit of your reflection on some of the differences that you spotted in being an education entrepreneur, creating a school, and your experience as an entrepreneur prior to that, kind of running a financial services company. What were sort of some of the similarities and differences of those two experiences?
You know, I think from like a tactile perspective, it's, you know, running, well, running a business of any kind, being an entrepreneur, like any endeavor you take on is going to have, unique pieces, but there's lots of patterns and similarity. And from a tactile perspective, like you still have to find a process to find customers. You have to create a system and a way to deliver on the promises that you make to those customers. And you need to be able to do that in a way that you can generate more money than it costs you to do so. So in a way, like the fundamental mechanics of entrepreneurship apply like in all across the board. I think for me though, the biggest lesson that I've learned is that being an entrepreneur in something that I don't deeply care about makes it really hard to it's in a way less meaningful work that you're not sure you want to keep doing is more difficult than all of the struggle it takes to do something that actually matters to you. I mean, starting a school was like, it's been no simple feat. Like it's been incredibly challenging. We've had lots of lessons learned, lots of mistakes. But I think the main difference for me is like, from an entrepreneur perspective, I'm not sure that I think even much of the differences, mostly because it was a matter of what actually mattered to me and finding something that I have never thought for a moment since starting my Acton I've not wondered for a moment if I was doing something that actually mattered. And that to me is like, if you want to be an entrepreneur, you have to find something like it's a challenging road. You have to find something that when it gets hard, you're going to say, this is worth it instead of pivot and switch and adjust and find something else, right? And so I think the real deep question that was hard for me and that Acton invited me to consider is, what is your calling? What is the thing that is going to light you up every day? That when it gets hard, you're willing to push through. That when you get to the end of life, you're going to be able to look back and feel like you spent your time contributing to something that mattered.
Oh, I love that. Yeah, and you have most of your children now in Heroes Academy in Boise, Idaho. You have five children, four of whom are in the program. Your 3-year-old soon to be in a little bit. And I imagine that that's incredibly rewarding for you as well, to see that what you're building is also benefiting your own children and all of these other children in your community. I wonder if you could talk a little bit from the parent perspective, Jake, about, what do you think is attracting more and more parents to the Acton model? This model continues to grow significantly, both here in the US and globally. Parents really love this learner-driven approach. Talk to us a little bit more about what you're hearing from parents.
It's worth probably saying we don't serve all families well. At Acton, like it's really a choice, right? If you believe like we do that each child has unique gifts, if you feel like as a parent that part of your responsibility is to help your child to develop what is uniquely theirs, and you want this place um, where the journey is harder but more meaningful, then you're probably like it's probably worth cracking open Laura's book and seeing if Acton is the right place for your family. If you don't see that, man, it's not an easier road at Acton. We say, I was just talking to a good friend of mine, a fellow owner, and he said to me, struggle at Acton is not a bug. Your child is going to struggle at Acton, and that's a feature. And what he means by that is that we believe in this idea of the hero's journey, this narrative of embarking on an exciting adventure and along the way encountering meaningful but difficult challenges. And the beauty of the hero's journey is, it's the pursuit of the grail, but at the end of the day, it's not about, reaching the grail that actually matters. It's about how the hero changes in the process. And so we at Acton believe that our young people should, when we say take responsibility for your learning, we're also saying um, go through the difficulties with support and encouragement in a way that transforms you. And if you think like as a parent, I think about this a lot, right? This idea of like the hero's journey and taking on challenges, and really what I want when my child turns 18 and launches into the world, a world full of distractions and full of things that can pull you off course. How can they be strong enough that they can get to the end of life and feel like they lived a fulfilling and satisfying life? They didn't get pulled away by distraction. They didn't fear doing the hard things, right? And so an Acton parent is gonna have to appreciate, not enjoy the process of going through, but appreciate what happens when a child gets the opportunity to learn and grow from challenges and mistakes. And so as a parent, like I get to see that firsthand. And it's incredibly challenging sometimes. And I've seen my children, like my oldest daughter is she like for about a period of like a year and a half, it felt like she was running into conflicts. And of course, in the studio, we have these amazing conflict resolution tools. And she had to learn to do the courageous thing of picking up those tools and working through difficulties in her interpersonal relationships, right? I just got we do a culture map survey in our upper studios. My daughter is now 12. And we do these culture surveys to kind of assess like the health of the culture. And I looked at the ratings and I realized that she is rated amongst her peers. Like her peers feel more connected to her across the board than any of the learners in the studio, right? So like each rates how they feel, like the connection they feel with each other. And she ranks at the top of that list. And I just thought, how amazing is it that the thing that she was struggling with the most, that oftentimes me and my wife wanted to step in and like, we wanted to solve the problem for her, but rather we trusted that she would figure it out. We trusted that there were tools and things that she could use, and that the courage to do something would be the catalyst for her growth. And it was, this is like years in the making, right? This isn't like this happened today and tomorrow got resolved. It's like we watched her go through this, but yet we watched her come out on the other side as this incredible young person who can maintain relationships with people of all different sorts and is patient and doesn't care so much anymore what someone might think of her. And so as a parent, man, yeah, we're like so thrilled about the experience. In fact, we were sitting at dinner the other night, my wife and I said, hey, we've been doing this now for, 9 years or so. And like, if you could go back, can you think of like one other place you wish you would have sent our children instead of Acton Academy? Like, where would that be? What's the top of that list? And we thought about it and we just thought, man, it has been such a messy journey. Like, opening an Acton is messy, right? Like, you're trusting young people. It has to be messy. If it's not messy, then you have adults just micromanaging, because young people are messy. We're messy. Like, us adults are like, you know what I mean? Walk into any organization and there's challenges. But we could not think of one other place we would even want to have, like, would have been even a close substitute. And so every day I think there's a sense of of gratitude that we get to watch our children uh, truly prepare for the rest of their lives by taking responsibility for who they are now, and practicing what it means to be, practicing just being a responsible person. And we love what we see.
Well, I've talked to parents of Acton Academy students who've told me that they have moved to specific locations in the U.S. Specifically to be near an Acton Academy, that is the draw of the model. And
We're
if they
seeing that
can't,
all over the board.
yeah,
You're like, we're seeing that. I just pulsed the owners last year, actually. I started acting when there was, I don't know, I was probably like somewhere between 10 and 15, like the 10th or 15th act, something like that. And now it's 300. And when we were new, like no one knew who we were, but literally we have had people move across the country to come to our little Acton. It's amazing. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, but we're seeing that all across the board. It's insane.
yeah, and if they can't find an Acton, they can go ahead and try to build one. So I wonder, maybe Jake, if you could talk a little bit about the network and the demand now from prospective founders who want to become owners within the Acton network. What is that process like? How do the individual Acton academies operate in relation to the larger network? Kind of all the ins and outs there.
Opening an Acton is unique, and we're very specific. So just for some context, we have over 20,000 parent entrepreneurs who have started the process of auditioning to open an Acton Academy. I mean, there is real demand for, whether Acton's right fit or not, like there's clearly a demand for something different. One thing that I think surprises people is that at Acton, we look for something very, very specific. And I think it's actually ends up being our superpower. At Acton, we rarely, if ever, accept a career educator as an Acton Academy affiliate or owner. And there are some exceptions to that. But for the most part, we are exclusively offering this opportunity for parent entrepreneurs, because parent entrepreneurs who have their children in our schools are the most committed to the mission of Acton. And, when you have your own children and the reason you do it is because you want them to find a calling that will change the world, you're not going to waver from that. It's very difficult to waver as a parent. And so the superpower, I think, of the Acton network is that we are built by, parent entrepreneurs who have this deep passion, this willingness to suffer for this important cause in creating this place for their children. And so the process is it's really it's the process is rather simple. It's to raise your hand and say, hey, I'm interested in exploring Acton, to do your research and decide if you are ready to take the next step to opening an Acton Academy. We look specifically for entrepreneurial parents, mostly because it's a very challenging journey and we want you to be equipped to be successful. Um, but yeah, I'm not sure if that answers
Yeah,
your, yeah,
it
that's
it does, Jake. Yeah, and just to clarify too, that these are independently owned and operated schools. Maybe you could talk a little bit about that relationship.
That's right. The Acton network it's an affiliate based network, right? So someone comes in and can own their own Acton, they own it, they come in and it's a relationship of shared learning. I mean, we have forums and tools, and it's really a way, like, it's, if you think about 300 schools all across the world experimenting on better ways to inspire, equip, and connect young people for a hero's journey, right? The amount of learning and sharing is just at this point really high. And so the nature of the relationship, yeah, is you come in and you build it's kind of a do-it-yourself kit more than it's not a franchise or anything like that. And so you kind of get to put you have your own sort of flavor in your Acton, but we all adhere to the same fundamental beliefs and promises, and that's what unites us.
So, as you think about the kind of previous 15 years of Acton's origin and now the network's new chapter, again, with you kind of taking the lead from Jeff and Laura, where do you see the network going over the next, say, 15 years?
I wish I had a really good answer to this. We obviously we think forward, but it's really hard to predict what Acton's going to be. We still see it as a grand experiment. We're discovering new things every day. We do not feel like we have figured everything out. We're just this pursuit of really figuring out how to serve these young people, to launch them into the world prepared. But I can tell you that a lot of schools are sort of, you know, there's this desire to be on the forefront of, like, the most innovative, the most, like, you're on the forefront of technology and AI and all that. And, like, we do that, right? And we're very innovative, obviously. But I think what makes Acton super unique is not how we're going to change to all those things over the next 15 years. I actually think it's how we're not going to change at all. Because the things that we're not going to change ever is our commitment to serving learners. It's our belief that each child is a genius. It's our commitment to inspiring them to find a calling that will change the world. We think our mission is, 1,000-year mission. Like, it's not going away. And that's like, so in 15 years, I'll bet we look totally different. I'll bet the way that we operate looks incredibly different because we'll learn and we'll adjust and we'll change and we'll serve learners better. But I think what's more important is the things that will never change. And it's those core things. And so when I think about Acton in 15 years, I think we'll look different, but I think we'll be absolutely the same at the same time.
Yeah, and do you think that there's any sort of ceiling for the number of Acton Academies that could exist?
That's so tough. I don't know the answer to that. I,
I hope
I,
there's thousands and thousands.
our next benchmark that we're aiming at is something like 1,000 campuses and 120,000 learners. We think we'll get there over the next 10 to 15 years. And if we don't, that's okay. But we think that that's the trajectory that we're on. And who knows? Like, it may be significantly more, maybe less. But we're sort of worried less a little bit about where we end up and a little more of, like, how are we serving young people well, and young people and families well today?
So, Jake, I have a lot of current and prospective micro school founders, education entrepreneurs listening and watching this show. And I wonder if you could share some of the sort of common challenges that you notice startup founders encountering, especially when they're starting a school, maybe even some of the mistakes you mentioned that you might have made in the early days. What are some of those challenges, and what are some of the best ways to overcome those challenges?
My context is obviously with acting. You probably have a really great perspective on this. Obviously, you see so many different things, and you're. Uh, but I think what I've seen as I think about I mean, it's like pick your challenge. I mean, there's so many. I think it comes down to like what is your deep fear? Like what are you most concerned about as a parent entrepreneur trying to build a school for your children and your community, right? Some people are terribly nervous about uh, like having to sell, right? And I don't mean sell like trying to convince someone, but like to get out there and to share your story and to share your vision is terrifying for some people. So to be able to share a powerful story and to invite people into your story is like a critical part of of starting a school of any kind and an Acton, of course. Um, and then I think that some of the early challenges are like who you decide to hire to be with you along the way, right? If you don't hire someone who believes as deeply as you do in what young people are capable of, like you're gonna immediately out of the gates maybe struggle with creating an environment that is sort of your vision. It's hard for me to think of what I would do outside of Acton because what I admire so much about Jeff and Laura is their commitment to mission. And we at Acton, like Acton's strong now, and it's like we have evidence, and so we trust a little bit more. But early on, like we really needed someone who was like willing to commit to mission at all costs, right? And so if I was starting alone, I think that like one of the hardest things would be staying true to mission because once you start going down the path of school, parents are nervous, like they're as much as they may believe in something different, they're still nervous, like, well, what happens if my child gets behind? Or what happens if, so all of these real concerns a parent have are going to sort of gravitate you back to a more traditional, mindset or environment. And so like at every turn, you just have to be like committed to you have to have a real mission and a real set of beliefs that you don't waver from, that you're willing for everything to fail as a result of you sticking to your mission. And I think that's probably, I mean, as I'm sharing some of these thoughts, I think it's probably like probably the biggest challenge is staying true to mission with so much systemic pressure to adjust back. That is so hard to do. And, at Acton, like I think we don't force any learning at Acton, and yet young people learn 2 to 3 grade levels per year till they max out the standardized test. Those standardized tests. That was important early on at Acton. Most of us don't even do standardized tests anymore because it just doesn't matter anymore. Like those lessons learned have given us confidence in Acton. And I just, like I say, starting that from scratch and trying to figure that out, just staying true to mission is probably like the most important thing to do and probably the hardest.
Yeah, I mean, it really is this sort of hero's journey for the school founder, just as much as it is for the learners, and of course, the hero's journey, centerpiece of the Acton Academy experience. So great to see, the founders themselves growing and kind of working through those challenges and having that courage, and then being able to sort of model that for the learners as well. And everyone is on their own hero's journey.
Well, I'll tell you too, if you saw a picture of me when I started our Acton, I had a lot darker hair. It's definitely gray out. So I think there's been a lot of transformation on mine internally, but also externally. And so but I think that's the beauty of the journey, right? Is like you get to change too.
Yeah, and so when you launched Heroes Academy in 2016, this was sort of the early days of innovative education. Of course, Jeff and Laura starting their school in 2009. And this kind of the early iteration of some of these more learner-driven, learner-centered models. What have you noticed since 2016? Has there been, in your mind, sort of a sea change, a cultural change in the way we approach education as a culture? What are you seeing, and what are you optimistic about?
Well, I'm optimistic because I think at the core, parents long for their children to find who they are and to discover something that really makes them, that gives them joy and meaning and purpose. And so, like, that's not going to change. And the more that the traditional school model, continues to be an outdated version of something that just doesn't serve our young people in the 21st century, like the more there will be that struggle. I think what's been interesting though is, I mean, you have these incredible pioneers like Jeff and Laura who go out and start something at a time where it doesn't feel so normal. and that unlocks the next person willing to do it, and then
Yeah.
the next person. And so in a way, they start this snowball of change. And I think COVID is probably like the next catalyst that I've seen, where it sort of peeled back the curtain a bit more for families and parents. And post COVID, I think there is a much more uh, rigorous pursuit of something different from a lot of families, and so we're seeing a lot. I think that's going to continue. I think we'll, like, contextually, we're going to see more and more families, and I mean, we're usually seeing more innovation on this front. But you're also saying, when you combine that with AI and technology and like accessibility to learning and the ability to learn anything at any, like we're just in a world that we don't even know what it's going to look like. And that's like a lot of why, at Acton, we just, like, yeah, we want you to make progress in meaningful skills, and like we have high standards of excellence, but we're not preparing you to, like, we're not trying to aim at the skills that we think you're going to need, that you need today, because in 10 years, the skills you're going to need are going to be different. And so if you're able to learn and pick up new skills, and you have this mindset of a learner and a lifelong learner, like, you can pick up those skills at any time. And that's what you're going to need, because the speed at which the world is changing you can't predict it, right? So you can't predict what we're going to have in 10 years and what it's going to look like. So the best thing you can do is prepare people, first, as to be good people, and second, to have real skills of learning and adaptability. So
Completely agree. So, Jake, my listeners and viewers can go to heroesacademy.org to learn more about your micro school in Idaho, or your Acton Academy in Idaho. But if they're interested in becoming an Acton founder and maybe going through that application and audition process, where can they go? What can they do?
So we're easy to find, and you can go to actonacademy.org, obviously, and start the process. But if it were me and I was unfamiliar with Acton, Laura's book Courage to Grow is like a really, I mean, it's a great read, because it's a powerful story of parents who wanted something different for their children, and kind of what evolved from it. But that's where I would start, and then, I mean, Google, YouTube, like, there's so much about Acton. I would just invite you to explore, in the way that you think is best. But we're easy to find. ActonAcademy.org is where you'd want to go if you wanted to actually start the audition process to potentially become an owner. Yeah.
Well, I'd highly encourage, again, my viewers to read Courage to Grow, to learn more about Acton Academy, listen to some of my past episodes with founders, including with Jeff Sandifer, and of course. So wonderful to talk with you today, Jake, and hear about your experience as a founder, and now your vision for sort of leading the network over the next several years to hopefully reach even more, many more thousands of learners worldwide. So, best wishes, Jake. And again, thank you so much for being on the LiberatED podcast.